We are going to be talking about the summer sweep up balancing project that's coming out most likely in the summer or starting in the summer. So this is akin to the project rebalance that they did about a year or so ago, where that time they basically balanced a bunch of different skills, like skilling activities, adding new things to some boring skills like agility, like shortcuts, and various other things for thieving and all that. They also rebalanced some of the weapons. It was like a pretty long project that they had to, do in batches right throughout like the year. So the summer sweep up is something very similar, but this time it's going to focus on combat stuff and loot tables. So, for example, some of the resources for certain monsters like wilderness bosses are going to get revamped. And some of the combat related stuff is basically additional things in elemental weaknesses, and also some enemies will have flat armor, things that are in perilous wounds already. And they're also going to be rebalancing some of the bosses, mainly TOA, so like some of the rooms are getting rebalanced. The purple rates are also changing, and things like Cerberus mechanically are changing as well, and quite a few other bosses like Nex as well. But of course, we'll go into more detail as I cover the topics, top to bottom, right? So disclaimer, this video will be in technically two parts because they released the first blog for it about a week or so ago, and since then they have released an additional part, which is like the updated part, right? Because there were some things in the blog the first time they didn't clarify because they wanted some feedback, and then the second part they clarified, such as the TOA purples and stuff like that, and some additional new ideas. So the first part of this blog video is going to cover the initial blog, right? So the reactions of what I recorded the first time, and then after that I will go to the second part and talk about the second updated version of the blog. So there should be timestamps, so it should be a bit easier and less confusing, if you're not trying to watch the whole video. But this is mostly just a listening video. This is a new style I'm trying to do, see if you guys like it. Usually I just do a bunch of different editing, but I kind of want to try one where it's just mostly talking, a bit of a freestyle, but I'm confident in the topic, so I think it should be okay. But anyways, enjoy the video. Again, we're gonna start with the first blog and then move on to the updated blog. The elemental weaknesses and NPC defense changes, mostly on the elemental weaknesses side, honestly, is quite interesting. So elemental weaknesses came from the other project rebalancing that I mentioned before, and so they've done a lot since then, right? Now they've really tried to like incorporate elemental weaknesses up to basically mid-level, right? With the Titans, elemental weaknesses, surging staff comes from them, and you can use it at things like Zora, even the Titans themselves. I even tested out Hespori, is pretty good there with like fire spells, and generally pretty solid for Slayer training magic. For example, like you can do 2x damage on things like ice trolls with fire spells. So yeah, pretty solid, but it hasn't really quite made it to like the end game yet. The closest thing I can think of is like using fire spells on Pillar of Nightmare, which is the end game boss, and it's kind of close to the Shadow, but yeah, it hasn't quite made its relevancy in the end game. And I think they're basically fleshing out everything a bit more before they, push for the end game elemental weakness metas, I guess, for future bosses. So basically they're just starting to polish up, right? Like I said, all the current monsters and even some bosses too with more elemental weaknesses. So for example, for air weaknesses, they're basically just saying like, all right, well, things that kind of fly, we're gonna give them elemental weaknesses. That's kind of what this is going for here. And also water weaknesses, I think it's pretty standard. Anything that's basically demon related, fire related, right? They're gonna add it to that. Earth weaknesses, this one's a bit weird, but basically what they're saying is they're encompassing golems. So Drakes and Guardians too have been moved to this category. But yeah, this one's definitely a bit harder to kind of like, naturally make up some ideas for. I think, for example, Giant Moles is on this list. It has an Earth weakness, but it doesn't really make sense because it literally digs underground, right? It's a freaking mole, so it's kind of weird that Earth spells would be very strong against Giant Mole, who's basically like a Earthbender. So yeah, that one's a bit off. But fire weaknesses, standard stuff, right? They added a bunch more bugs, so a bunch of like top creatures like Kelphi Queen, Sarachnis, those things plant-based creatures, right? I mean, it's pretty straightforward. I like that. And they also added a more expansive table here that you can click on. So I basically opened it up already. So they have the current stuff here. These are like the current existing weaknesses for monsters. As you can see, a lot of them don't have any weaknesses, right? They've only worked on a few, right, initially. So there's a lot of monsters with, yeah, no elements weaknesses. But look at this proposed version here. You can see that this whole freaking list of creatures, right? Like, I think this is probably like at least half of all the relevant things that you will kill in this game on this table. And you can see that they're really trying to add elemental weaknesses to just about everything. And I'm going to scroll down and I'll point out some really interesting stuff because, you know, there are, again, some bosses. For example, look at this one. We have Bofra Kriyath, which is a minion boss from the Krosusaroth, right? Zami boss. And like I said, demons, it's going to be weak to water. So could be interesting metas, like particularly with like seasonal modes with leagues, right? Where let's say you're like a mage-based player in leagues. It could be really interesting, you know, using water spells on those God Wars, Zami demons and stuff like that. Or like I said, if they ever add like some end game options, weapon wise, that uses elemental weaknesses that isn't like a harm staff, who knows, right? You might have some cool end game metas using these elemental weaknesses in the future. So there's a lot of potential. Now overall, I guess I don't have a problem with them, you know, expanding on the elemental weaknesses stuff. That just gives them more room to work with future updates. But yeah, for example, Cave Kraken is weak to Earth spells. So you already mage the Cave Krakens and I guess the Kraken boss. So that's actually quite interesting. I could see that, like, let's say the Surge staff, right? The Twin Flame staff, I mean, with, I guess, Earth Wave, it could probably beat the Trident possibly. And look at this, Dagonoth Rex. Again, there's some mini metas here. For example, for early accounts, like early Iron Man, the Earth spells with the Twin Flame staff especially, it's probably going to beat stuff like the Abin's Blast, right? This will absolutely make some immediate different strategies, you know, come to life the moment this update comes in. Oh, look, Eldritch, the Ice King, is finally getting that fire weakness of 50% bonus damage and accuracy. So that's really cool. So like, that's surprising, right? They didn't do elemental weaknesses for the boss that literally drops the freaking Twin Flame staff, you know, that enhances elemental weaknesses, but they are working on that, so that's cool. Jad being also, yeah, 40%. So everything in 5Ks, for example, will be 40% weak to water. I don't think that's really going to change a whole lot in terms of like people ranging the 5Ks mostly. So that's probably not going to do much. Just, you know, more like maybe leagues or something, right? Alright, so we have Nilokiss, which is top enemies. Yeah, I don't think anybody's going to bring regular spellbook for these. So as you can see, it's really hit or miss, right? It's just potential, you know, for future updates, future weapons maybe. But yeah, that's about it on the elemental weaknesses. You kind of get the idea. They're just adding a lot of stuff. A lot of it's hit or miss. And some of it has hidden potential for complementary things that can come out. But anyways, we're going to just quickly go down to NPC defense changes. I don't really think this is too big of a deal. But the interesting one is that they do like how the flat armor stuff works for the Perilous Moon bosses. So if you don't know what that is, for example, in Perilous Moon, the ice guy, it has this thing called negative flat armor or something like that, where effectively additional hits, or each hit that you do on that boss, you will gain an extra damage on that boss. So that's why like weapons that hit multiple times is really good on the ice boss, for example, because you will gain literally extra bonus damage, right? And same for the red guy in Perilous Moons, right? Like every hit you do on the red guy is additional damage guaranteed. I think the ice guy, you get like 4 damage bonus per hit. So that means like, you know, Scythe will get like 12 extra damage for free. Dragon Claws is like 16 or something. And then there's the opposite as well. There's like negative flat armor. For example, the Eclipse guy, every hit that you do, you actually lose like 4 damage or something like that. So they like that concept, and they're trying to maybe add that to some more enemies. And yeah, I'm not really sure how that one's gonna go. I mean, it definitely helps to make new weapons or weapons that do multi-hits, you know, become more useful. And then that creates its own metas, right? So, as you can see here, these armor zombies, things like that, they're getting a flat armor. So I guess you'll do additional damage per hit on those. And then a -3 just means that it's negative flat armor, right? So you'll do actually -3 extra damage on, I guess, you know, every hit. So yeah, they're experimenting a little bit, you know, less tame compared to like obviously elemental weaknesses, right? They're not changing too many things here. Let's see if there's anything that could be interesting here. What the hell, crocodile? Okay, they're introducing negative flat armor on crocodile. Yeah, I don't know. I guess they're just trying to introduce a lot more multi-hit weapons, right? As a new form, I guess, or a new style of like, you know, combat gear or weapons rather. I guess this does incentivize more variety of weapons that can come onto the game. So they're not touching it on bosses, thankfully. I feel like that would require insane discussion, to be fair. So yeah, it seems that all the flat armor changes that they're trying to do are on really miscellaneous monsters. Okay, this is a huge topic here. We got loot table changes. Now, this one is a fun one to talk about because I've always talked about this throughout the years, you know, particularly when Muspa and then like shortly after that, like TOA came out, or maybe was it the other way around? But either way, they both came out like at a very similar time. And the thing that these two PVM encounters have in common is that they just shit out a ridiculous amount of resources, particularly the seeds. And this is a great example here that Jagex mentioned, right? They're just talking about how torso seeds used to be 50k, and then, you know, these two bosses came out and instantly they went down to 6500 GP. And they also go on to talk about how it just doesn't make sense for them to, you know, try to make torso seeds more profitable by simply just forcing more monsters to drop even more torso seeds, right, to make up for the loss in GP, because it'll just keep making it go down even more, right? So the only option is really to reduce the amount of seeds that you are currently getting at certain places. And this doesn't mean strictly like seeds, right? They're also thinking about tweaking things like sharks, like, you know, fish, crafting stuff, right? Things like that. So they also have a little table here. At least this one is not as crazy, you know, to look at. It's like pretty straightforward, I guess. So as you can see here, these are the lists. We have fish, gems, runes, herbs, and seeds, right? So for fish, they are thinking about adjusting a lot of these bosses here, like Zora, Muspa, Vorkath. So let's see here. For Zora, they're thinking drop rate for food reduced by 75%. That removed drop rate is then replaced with a shark drop. When this shark drop is hit, it's 50-50 whether you get sharks or twice as much. Okay, so I guess overall, they're just gonna give you 75% of what you would normally get, I guess, as food. So it's like a 25% nerf. And I guess for Muspa, Vorkath, Larynx Keys, Brimstone Chest is also gonna be a 25% nerf on the food amount. Let's see, they're buffing though some enemies like Grotesque Guardians. They're gonna get a whopping 1 in 30 to get 20 raw sharks. So there's no raw shark drops at the moment for Grotesque Guardians, so they're just literally adding it, right? So it's basically a full 100% increase, yeah, because initially there is none. Same with Drakes, you're gonna get like 5 cooked sharks, I guess, out of 1 in 20 rate. Smoke Devil boss, they're gonna replace the Bullseye Lantern that was a 1 in 100 with 30 raw sharks. Okay, I'm cool with that, honestly. Not a big deal. Let's see here. We got gems. So wildy bosses for sure. I think that is something that a lot of people don't necessarily complain about, but they will make it very apparent when they finish that grind. Like, let's say, you know, an Ironman viewer of mine, they're like, oh yeah, well, I just finished my Voidwalker and oh my god, the supplies are insane. Yes. So that's gonna be sad, I guess, for those people that, you know, really liked the crazy amount of resources. To be honest, this nerf doesn't even seem like it would really make these wildy bosses like that much less insane for supplies, because effectively here, Veon, Finidaz, Callisto, they're just getting nerfed in the crafting department. So for example, Vedion is going from Uncut Rubies of 75 to 50, so that's like a, I guess 30% decrease. But it's still a crazy amount. Like, you still get 50 rubies, for goodness sakes, you know? And then like 25 for like the easier version. And yeah, similar ideas for these other wildy bosses. Grotesque Guardian's getting a buff though. You're getting more Onyx Bolt Tips, so that means more Alchables, I guess. Oh, I guess with regards to fish, I don't think it's too problematic though, I want to say. Just because you can fish Carambones so easily nowadays. And yeah, I feel like food isn't that big of an issue, you know? Especially with that Carambon, yeah, tech existing for so long. Alright, so for runes, they mentioned something about how chaos runes are just like so irrelevant nowadays. So they just, yeah, are trying to get rid of a lot of the chaos rune drops that you can get from bosses and similar situations with like regular enemies. So Forecast's getting nerfed on the chaos runes and death runes, I guess. SG, some nerfs on soul runes as well, but on the opposite end though, they are buffing death runes and soul runes in other places. Oh, this is interesting. Leviathan and Abyssal Sire is going to get the Aether Rune Catalyst. And this is like new. It came out with the Yama boss. Basically, it's like the ability to combine, what is this, soul runes and cosmic runes or something together to make that, you know, combo rune. So, okay, this is probably the most biggest one, like I said. It's the seed stuff, right? So they are nerfing all the seeds from TOA by 40%. Let's look at Muspa here. It's getting nerfed by approximately Torso's 50%. Raynar seed 3 to 2, so I guess that's like 30% nerf. Let's see. Wow, there's some weird ones too. Like, wait, what is this? Eldritch Dwarf Wheat Seed? I don't even know what this is. What is this boss? Not sure. Kriara though, it's getting nerfed too. Like, what the heck? I don't think anybody complained about Kriara, you know, dumping too many Dwarf Wheat Seeds and crashing that market. I think that issue has always been a problem since a long time ago, right? Like, I don't think anybody really cares about Dwarf Wheat Seeds, but okay, Raynar seeds are getting buffed. Interesting. Very interesting. Cerberus is has a 1 in 50 chance to give you 2 seeds. That's kind of cool, considering, you know, you lose so much freaking prayer at that boss. Interesting. Smoke Devil's getting Raynar seeds instead of coal. And the Moxiato early game boss is getting the Huasca seed. That makes the new prayer regen potion. So that's another way to get it, other than I guess killing, what is it, the Huey boss, right? Okay, Crocodile is really random. They're adding some herbs to that enemy. Okay. All right, Venenatus, Callisto again, right? Like, these guys do drop an insane amount of resources. So those are getting nerfed a bit. So Venenatus getting nerfed from Snapdragons, right? From 150 to 100. So yeah, that's a sizable nerf, but honestly still pretty OP. You get literally 100 Snapdragon herbs from the big boy. Callisto getting about a 40% nerf on this Snapdragon seed. Still get 5 though, that's crazy. And the weaker Callisto, or is that the, no, I think that's still the main Callisto, yeah. 150 toe flash to 100. But you get the idea. I think these are honestly very necessary, because honestly, even on an Iron Man, especially if you do a lot of PVM, you will not really worry about seeds. Like, for example, gone are the days where you really need to spam brews. Like, the only place you're gonna spam brews nowadays is like Nex, and you don't really need to do Nex that urgently, especially because, you know, you have Yama boss nowadays, and also in this block they're gonna make Nex do less damage, so even less need for brews. But like, generally speaking, you don't really need brews. So stuff like Toflax seeds, man, you really do not need this many Toflax herbs or seed drops for monsters. You're just gonna have so much that you don't even use. And let's see, where else would you use brews nowadays? Maybe a little cogs, maybe a little at top, but those are all like yeah, pretty small amounts nowadays. All right, anyways, let's move on to the next thing here. massive one here. We got Tombs of a Muska changes. I even prepared a little doodle, you know, graph to or I guess visual to help explain some points here. But anyways, let me drink some more. All right, so they are gonna change some of the bosses and like the puzzle rooms. So the first one is Baba. Basically, this is a complaint that I've had for a long time, you know, like to be honest, I'm just not a fan of stuff like red Xing, you know. I try my best to do all the, you know, canon challenges, like real challenges in this game that Jagex created without using those kind of things, because I just don't like the fact that, you know, you're gonna just freeze the boss. It makes the fight not feel like a fight. You're just, you know, it's just too cheesy and doesn't feel like old school. So I'm glad that Jagex also agrees. So they're basically redoing Baba, like the mechanics, so that the mechanics feels like you don't need to cheese the boss, right? Now they're not really getting rid of Red X, right? You can still do it, even with this change, but they are, like I said, making the mechanics less annoying. So for example, if you play melee, which you should, then the boss's auto attacks does nothing to you, right? And currently it does chip damage, right? And that's like one of the you know, complaints that people have, and that's why they would, you know, cheese the boss. And the other one is the baboons spawns. They're really annoying, which I super agree, because the baboons, unfortunately, you can't one-shot them all the time. It's random, you know, it's just completely random. Sometimes you one-shot, sometimes it takes you 4 hits, and they actually do quite a bit of damage. You know, they're kind of like pures. So yeah, now you can actually one-shot them if you can hit your, you know, max, right? You should definitely be able to max to 35. So that's pretty much guaranteed for just about anybody to one-shot them. So that's nice. Also, damage from thrown debris is now fully shifted onto anything you split the damage with. Boulders and sarcophagi alike, which should make things a little less frantic. So that's nice. Basically, what this means is that I think I'm understanding what they're saying is that when you put your character next to the rock, right, the giant boulder or the sarcophagi, then all that damage, regardless of how many people are using the sarcophagi, will actually transfer. Because for example, let's say in a duo, right, currently if you want to use the wait, hold on, let's see, is a duo a good example? Yeah, okay, so let's talk about duo again. So in a duo, for example, there would be 2 boulders, right? But the problem is 2 people cannot share the same boulder, because then one person will take damage and then one person won't, right? Because then the boulder is only for one person. This one's a bit of a surprise, honestly, some of these changes, but I think the biggest one though is this one. The number of orbs during Aka's range phase has been reduced. So I think that's fine, I suppose, because yeah, sometimes there are some insane RNG moments where honestly, unless you're Neo for Matrix, like, man, you just can't dodge it, you know? Or you do like insurmountable amounts of freaking Akkas, like, you know, hundreds if not thousands of Akkas to get to that point where you can dodge just about any combo of orbs. So I'm not exactly sure how crazy this reduction is, but I guess any reduction is good. Anyways, Akka is going to be a bit more predictable. This is basically what it's saying, like the stage vigilant is going to be a bit more predictable, so that's kind of nice. Yeah, I think this is good, but obviously the butterfly stuff, I don't think they can really patch it without fundamentally changing this boss a ton. So you can still butterfly, and of course, I would say, you know, butterflying is okay. It's kind of like kiting Sarah, you know. This is some strats that are, I guess, pretty old school in some ways. But yeah, Akka is definitely gonna get a bit nicer now, more consistent, less getting stacked by, you know, jizz balls. So. All right, Carefree is also getting some few changes here. Carefree's magic defense, oh sorry, the soldier scarab's magic defense is getting lowered. So that's nice, because frick me, dude, trying to kill them with a trident on like my terrible, man, it's rough. All right, scarabs no longer scale the defense with raid level. Oh, okay, that's nice, that is nice. So that means they're just gonna be way easier to hit regardless, no matter what. I guess they were quite tanky in the higher tiers or higher invos. Arcane scarabs are guaranteed to move after a certain number of attack. Okay, this one's definitely, again, more consistency, right? You just can't predict sometimes how the arcane scarab's gonna jump around, mainly in solos. Very predictable in groups, but yeah, in solos it's definitely not so predictable, but now it will be. Okay, Zebek, this one's weird. Waves no longer push the player back. I feel like they could have just added an info or something, you know, to make it that so you can keep the pushing thing, right? Because I feel like that's very immersive, you know. If you get hit by the waves, it pushes you back, right? Like what's wrong with that, right? But I guess in return you deal 30% more damage. I don't really like the way that they're doing this. I feel like people don't really complain about the waves all that much, right? So I don't know. They don't even need to touch that back, honestly. Okay, Wardens, this one's pretty decent. Skull Bombs during P2 can no longer land underneath active Warden Obelisk. Okay, I concede. I think this one is fair, just because sometimes you can't see the freaking shadow of where it's gonna land, you know? Under the obelisk and stuff, so fair. Alright, COA puzzle changes. Okay, they're basically getting rid of some waves in the monkey puzzle room. They're also just gonna let you like guarantee do maximum damage on the cursed baboons and shamans. Currently, that's not a thing right now. I guess I'm okay with that, but I don't know. Did they really need to remove 2 of these? I feel like the changes before this was already so good. The amount of water required for Path of Chronus no longer scales linearly with players, so that one's I think that's fine. I think that's kind of annoying too, for sure, when you're like just doing these puzzles that aren't necessarily the fun part of the raid, and you know it just makes it more frustrating when you get multiple people and then it just makes it super long if they don't know how to actually do the water fetching properly. So hit points on obelisk on path are slightly reduced so that 1 downs aren't required boosting above 99. Okay, this one's fine. I don't mind that, because right now you kind of need to use the plugin if you want to do consistent 1 downs in a solo, so that's cool. Alright, COA miscellaneous changes here. Okay, this one's kind of good here. Any drain stats will be restored at the end of a boss fight. Pretty sick. Smelling salts will reapply their boost as they expire. That's kind of crazy. That's a pretty strong buff for salts. Alright, this one's massive. Lots to talk about here. Lots to talk about, but in essence, this thing that they're addressing here with the TOA drops is the exact thing I've been warning people about literally like 3 years ago. Like 2 weeks into TOA, I was already noticing that these drops, the rate, especially like the fangs and the light bearers, the rate that they were coming in was just insane. Like it was just like so obvious in my mind that these items was not gonna hold value in just a few years. And guess fucking what? I was right. You know, freaking, I remember having this discussion on the podcast, and Soul Mission was like, what's the problem? There's no problem. And of course, you know, like, I guess economically, theoretically speaking, right? Like, just let supply and demand do its thing, right? But obviously, this game is more than just supply and demand, right? It's just something is fundamentally wrong if you know that these like super strong items are just going to be worth like nothing in a few years, because that's kind of like a big reason why you want to go and do the content, right? Especially as regular players, right? Is that you want to go and get these pricey items, but if your fang is literally under 10 mil, right? And then everything else is also dirt cheap, and the only good thing from that raid is literally the shadow that's worth a damn, that's a huge problem, right? You can't just justify and say like supply and demand is going to do its thing, you know, right? That's not the point, right? So it's nice to know that Jagex admitted that they fucked up. Let me break it down, the issues, I would say, if you guys aren't aware, right? When it comes to TOA drops, right? There's a few layers, okay? So if you didn't know, the chance of you getting a purple, which is a unique, right, will scale up based on the difficulty, right, of your TOA invocation, right? Invocation just means level, right? Difficulty level. And as I said, the higher you complete the invo, right, of the raid, the better the chance of you getting a purple. So for example here, let me show you a little paint doodle. So for example, right now we have a 1 in 24 chance of getting a purple if you were to solo raids 3 at an invocation of 300. 300 is kind of like the expert tier, right? So this is where the expert tier begins. So it's like the end game, you know, level, right? So TOA can actually be insanely easy Like for example, it could be level 0, where it's effectively just like a newbie version, practice version, right? And you can still get purples, just astronomically low. So it basically goes up like this, right? It's exponential. The problem is the exponential, improvement in drops is catastrophic, because look at what happens, right? From TOA Invo 300 of 1 in 24, if you go just up 100 invos, right? TOA Invo 400, the drop becomes somewhere along the lines of like 1 in, I want to say 11 or 12. So somehow in just 100 in 100 invo levels, you've effectively half the drop rate for a purple. That is no good. That is absolutely no good. Because think about it this way. Let's say you complete a Invo 300 TOA in about 30 minutes, right? Okay? A TOA Invo 400, you can probably complete this in only 5 to 10 more minutes. 5 to 10 more extra minutes, but you effectively get half the drop rate. So that does not make any sense whatsoever. That scaling is just not sustainable, right? Okay, and then also you can go to TOA Invo 500, and it's approximately like a 1 in 5 to 1 in 6, okay? So these rates aren't exact, of course, because there's some variables, and I might not remember the rates exactly, but it's close. It's around this ballpark, okay? That I can tell you. So even jumping from 400 to 500, right, which is another Invo, again, it's halved once again, effectively. So it's crazy that you can get rates that is in the single digits, like for example, TOA 400, I would say it's probably one of the most popularly, in terms of, people doing TOA, it's probably one of the most popular choices of Invo range that people do, like the 400 range. So it's crazy. Just one guy alone can go in there, and I wouldn't say they're particularly that hard, right? Especially if you have like near end game gear. Yeah, people are just pumping these 111 drops out in solos, no problem. All right, there's probably a good amount of people do 500s as well for 1 in 6. I genuinely believe the biggest issue of supply definitely comes from these two ranges of Invo TOAs, right? Whether it's solo or whether it's groups. There's a reason why the Fangs and the Lightbearer is worth like sub 10 mil. I guess ever since this blog release, I've heard Fang is like 20 mil, but that's obviously merchants just buying it out and trying to see if they can like make a gamble. It doesn't matter how late it is, right? It's better to fix it regardless of how late. Obviously, it would have been better if they fixed this 2 weeks or a month into the TOA release, right? But fuck it, 2 to 3 years. Sometimes, never too late. Okay, I'm a believer of that. So, for example, here, I think the biggest thing they need to fix is the scaling issue, right? From the 400 to 500 range, maybe even like around 350 to 500. But I'm gonna give my 2 cents on this in terms of suggestions, right? Because they asked for feedback. So here's kind of like an idea, or I guess 2 layers, right, of ideas. So the first idea is like the main one, right? Which is simple. Just readjust the rates, right? Like readjust the curve, like I said. So I'm gonna give you guys some numbers just as an example, right? So I genuinely believe, at least for solos, a 300 TOA as it is right now is fine. It's 1 in 24. I think that's great, because it's still not as ass as Chambers. For example, Chambers is like a 1 in 28 in a solo. I would guess similar times, maybe even a little faster. So they're similar, right? Around the same similar ballpark. I think that's fine. But like I said, it's just TOA 400 being like a 1 in 12 or something as it is right now. It's too crazy. So my suggestion is 1 in 18, anywhere around there. TOA 500, 1 in 12. So effectively, they're gonna just get like twice as bad. But hold on, don't hound me just yet, okay? Because like I said, there's 2 layers I want to talk about, right? That will make it a bit more fair. So effectively, just this first layer alone would already make those items go up, right? Every single item, all across the board, would go up, right? Doesn't matter if it's the Fang, Lightbearer, doesn't matter if it's the Shadow, Missouri, everything will go up, right? All right, so here's the second layer, right? So obviously a big problem that a lot of people will agree with TOA is that, like I said, the Fangs and the Lightbearers are simply too common. Therefore, because it's too common, right, the prices are so low. So what you can do is that at higher invocation thresholds, let's say at 400 and then let's say at 500, right? If you reach those thresholds, then instead of Lightbearer and Fangs being individually 1 in like 3.4, maybe they can instead be like a 1 in 6, right? So maybe it becomes almost twice as rare. But in return, because those items become more rare, that means the other items will become less rare in those rates. So, for example, let's talk about Shadow, right? Currently, Shadow, regardless, I guess, of whatever info you do, right? If you get a purple, if you see a purple, it's 1 in 24 chance, right? Now, how about this? If you do a 400 TOA, when you see a purple, instead of 124, is a 1 in 20 chance to get a Shadow, right? And of course, stuff like Missouri, you know, like I said, would get a little bit more common as well in that case. And then, like, for example, 500, instead of 124, it's 1 in 16. So it will still massively encourage players to, you know, try to do the 400s, try to do the 500, right? But like overall though, everything will be a bit more rare because like I said, you know, the base rate of seeing purples, if it's like 1 in 18, right, instead of 1 in 11 or whatever for 400, and then 1 in 12 instead of like 1 in 6 for 500, right? Effectively, everything is still more rare. This second layer will make the Lightbearer and Fang even more rare. So therefore, those two most affected by the price issue will become a lot more valuable, right? I could see it doubling or tripling, you know, or quadrupling even, right? Maybe like 40 mil, 50 mil range. It'll feel so much better if you see a freaking Lightbearer or Fang, right, in your 400s, because that thing's actually going to be worth more than like, you know, 10, 20 mil or whatever it is, right? We're almost at the point where, yeah, there's not too much to talk about, but let's just quickly talk about Phosani Nightmare. So not much to say. Basically what they're saying is they're going to remove one phase of Phosani Nightmare. So I think currently there's 5 phases, right? So they're going to get rid of one of the early ones because, to be honest, the first 3 phases of Phosani Nightmare are basically the same phases over and over again. So if you take this phase off, effectively the kills are 20% faster, right? So that means, yeah, you're going to have better drops per hour. And I guess no one's really going to complain about that too much. Just because, yeah. For example, it would line up a bit closer to Yama kill times, I guess, in a solo, right? Because I want to say Phosani Nightmare, if you're sweating it, it's only like 7 kills an hour or something. So this would probably go up to like 8 or something, you know, which is better than nothing. Anyways, next. Okay, so like I said, they want to make next deal less damage. So they're going to make things more consistent throughout the fight. Like you're going to be able to heal some damage back from damaging weavers. Her melee attacks will, you know, attack for consecutive 3 hits instead of just randomly attacking between melee and mage. So that would make it more predictable to swap. You can also pray mage on the incoming damage to reduce it a bit. So yeah, you're going to definitely save a lot of HP, so it's not going to be as much of a bruise simulator, so that's good. I think that's fine, you know, that's pretty fair. Huey Quado, honestly, bro, I think Huey Quado's kind of a lost cause because the mechanics for this boss is doo-doo, right? This boss is meant to be a boss for mid-level players, right? But the problem is this boss is so heavily catered to team play because there's this weird mechanic where I believe that 3 players has to pray 3 different protection prayers. Otherwise, you actually do reduce damage. So that means you basically can't even solo this boss, right? I feel like for a mid-level boss, I feel like the option to solo it without like incurring crazy penalties would be fair. But no, it's just, you know, it's terrible. Like soloing this boss is horrific. It's astronomically terribly slow versus doing a group. So yeah, I feel like this boss is a bit of a lost cause. And not only that, like I said, this wand thing that Jagex is trying to save from like Oblivion, it's a little bit hopeless. I mean, you know, they're making it stronger, and the idea is that they think that maybe you guys can use this staff at Ulm early on, but for real though, like I don't know, man. This is a bit hopeless. I guess they're adding that Earth Elemental Weakness. I mean, if these changes happen around the same time, okay, fine. I guess there is some incentive, but I just feel like, man, you're probably. I feel like, is it really gonna be the Trident? It's hard to say. I don't think it's really gonna be like much better than a Trident, right? And I feel like Slayer is just so important, right? I feel like you're more likely to get a Trident without even trying versus you going out of your way to do some huge auto for it, right? So yeah, I'm not gonna lie, this boss is it's just a lost cause. I think the only thing they can truly do to salvage this boss is to get rid of that stupid 3 prayer activation requirement in order to do maximum damage. If they get rid of that, I feel like a lot of mid-level players will actually give it a try, because soloing is just way more convenient for a lot of players, right? And it's a mid-level boss, so I don't know why they're stressing the design of this boss so much to needing at least 3 people, you know? So I think if they get rid of that mechanic, that would actually maybe save this boss a bit, on top of, you know, these changes that they're doing with the wand. Okay, so they're adding a new ring which will give 20 defense to from Perilous Moons, an all melee style. So I guess this ring is pretty decent for the early game that you can use, you know, within the place that you get it. And also Granite Ring's getting a buff. Nothing crazy. I don't think it's too important. Like, you're not getting any offensive boosts at all, so I would say this ring is still pretty much like useless. Over Fighter keys. So effectively they're letting you do combat achievements easier, I want to say, right? And you can still do the proper Ober and Brio Fighter that drops like their unique stuff with the key still. So yeah, that's pretty much what they're doing with that. Cerberus, this one's interesting. They are gonna make the lava pools more reaction time, so you can dodge it. And the radius is not as bad, because now it hits you even if you're like 1 tile next to it, instead of, you know, they're making it so that it's only on the tile that it's on that will damage you, so that's good. Also, the ghost attack will finally have some easier, more convenient way to reduce prayer, to not take so much prayer, right? So they're making it so if you put Ward of Arceus on, which is an Arceus spellbook, then the incoming prayer drain will be reduced by 30%. I still think this is not the most ideal way, because it basically forces you to be on Arceus, which is kind of lame. But I will say that on top of this, maybe they can do something else instead. Why don't you make it so that if you pray correctly, you just don't get drained 30 prayer? Because why the hell do you still get punished for praying correctly? That's so stupid, right? Like, I think I would be okay if, let's say, you pray correctly and it drains your prayer by 5 each, right? I think that's fair. But like, yeah, it's just silly, you know? They should just change it so that you're not punished for praying correctly, you know? Like a little chip damage, man. Not a freaking 30. It's like, that's a punch to your balls, you know? Anyways, Duke Succulus, I think they are going to let you stack the things that you use to wake it up. So that's nice. So that means, yeah, you're not gonna have to like prep every single kill, but they are gonna buff the HP of the boss by 10% to compensate. But still, this is much nicer. It's really annoying having to prep every single kill. All right, so let's see other changes. Honestly, here. Oh, this one's so nice. We're gonna be able to actually know our progress of Vistage rings from DT2 bosses. Amazing, amazing. This other one here is pretty nice as well. Grandmaster common achievements. So if you have Master tier, they're gonna give you the 2-minute thrall timer, which is really nice. And it won't, you know, really force people to feel like they have to do Grandmaster, because a lot of, you know, doing Grandmaster involves team content, and yeah. I think that's probably like the number 1 complaint. It's just like, oh man, I have to do so much team content in an MMO so I can get the 2-minute thrall. So no, you don't have to do that anymore, I guess. Tidy up magic attack animations. Thank God they're gonna fix the weird delays of some of these weapons. And for the GM players, you can actually get the Slayer task effect even without being on a task for the Inferno. So that's pretty cool. Oh god, my throat hurts, guys. I've talked too much. I think I've thoroughly covered everything. And yo, I don't think I'm gonna be editing this video like at all, because I think we kind of, you know, just talked about everything without too many weird interruptions, other than a few coughs. But yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed the review, I guess analysis, whatever you want to call it. You know, just a chat about this summer sweep update. I think overall I do like the overall ideas that they have, right? I would give this a solid A minus, right? The only reason I'm not gonna give it a perfect A is because TOA changes. 3 years, bro. What's going on, Jagex? You know, why did it take you so long? But other than that, I think it's pretty damn good. I'm excited for most of these. I think they will promote longevity of the game. You know, it will promote healthy balance in this game. So yeah, let me know which part of the blog stuff that you're most excited for. You know, whether it's the elemental weakness stuff, the loot changes. I mean, I don't even know if the TOA freaking drop nerfs, right? Inevitably, it's gonna be a drop nerf, right, for TOA. So I don't think you guys will be too excited for that, but like, let's be real, right? Long-term health of the game is very important, guys, because without it, we might not be playing this game in 10 years, you know? So yeah, it's very important that Jagex does this, and I'm happy to see that Jagex is very knowledgeable, you know, about these issues, right? When I read this, I'm like, okay, yeah, man, like whoever wrote this like really knows a lot of the issues, you know, the history of the issues and how they're gonna solve it. So that's good. The approach is good. Let's talk about the adjusted points in the summer sweep up. So this is like part 2. I'm guessing they will do more of these additional like changes once they talk more about the specific parts when they're closer to actually putting some of these live, right? As far as elemental weaknesses and monster defense stuff goes, most of what they said is going to roll out without issues. Now they're changing Vorkat's weakness to fire weakness, which makes a lot of sense because it's literally a zombie and it's icy dragon, right? So naturally it should both be weak to fire. And they're going to add this new spellbook called Monster Inspect that lets you see the opponent's stats and elemental weaknesses. That's really cool. I really hope they can make the interface really easy to read, like the wikis, and yeah, just try to jam in some good information. Otherwise, you know, if it's not enough, it might just be another OSR's wiki angle. But hopefully there's sufficient information that, yeah, players can actually use that spell, you know, to learn more about the monsters. And I like that, you know, I feel like it's an immersive way to do it using a spell, right? Rather than just like right click, you know, examine or something. So that's cool. And the flat armor stuff, very minor for the most part. They're going to get rid of the flat armor on Zamper. They were thinking about adding it there. And anything else that they've added with flat armor for this new proposal, again, they're all like minor stuff like armor zombies or something, if I remember another example. So very small minor thing there. This section here is definitely the big section because they've now really refined a lot of the Tombs of Musket changes that they were thinking about. For starters, they're just saying that, yeah, they're not going to mess with Red X. So I'm guessing any methods, even like non-Red X methods that you could consistently do so that the boss only quakes, I'm guessing they're saying all that stuff will stay, you know? You really shouldn't worry about it at all. Like, you can just fight the boss normally for the most part, and it should be very chill fight, as long as you do the mechanics correctly, which aren't that hard. Now, for Akka, they basically said that you can still do Butterfly just as efficiently as now, for the most part. I guess maybe they didn't clarify it before, but I just assumed that that was the case. They said that even if you mess up, it still won't swap into a, you know, another style too fast, assuming they meant like butterflying. Now we're going to talk about Zebex. So the wave pushing thing, like I said, I think it's cool to still keep that somewhere. So yeah, they're gonna just keep the waves and they're gonna reduce damage on subsequent hits, which I think is better. Now Carefree, this one is good because I don't like the fact that for some reason you can't use the bone dagger at the start, because I already knew that was like a glitch or something, right? And you could technically bone dagger and it works as soon as it wakes up from the phase 2 transition. So that's interesting. So they're just making it so that it works right away, which is awesome. We're not certain if it's fixable. See what I mean? It's so buggy. It's literally just some glitchy shit with the bone dagger, right? It's a very old item, so whoever coded it back then was probably, yeah, just kind of doing whatever. But yeah, hopefully they can fix it, because that'll be sick. All right, anyways, now the real topic, which is talking about how they're going to nerf TOA purples. And if you watch the first part of this video where I show you my suggestion of how they nerfed it, it's basically the same spirit of what I suggested. So that's really freaking cool. Effectively, they made it so that the higher the invos that you do, the lower the chance you'll see fangs and the ring. But obviously, to compensate, the other items, right, will show up a bit more often. So that's really cool because again, the overall purples will still be nerfed, but it's not going to be that bad in the, you know, higher info. So basically anything like 300 to 500, it will start nerfing the fangs and the light bearers compared to now, right? And the other items will start, you know, being increased, relatively speaking. But throughout all of TOA though, there will be a nerf, right, on the purples. So basically they gave you this chart here, which I think is a really easy way to show you, right, what they mean by this. So as you can see, the 150 invos, the 200 invos, 250s, 300s, it's all the same, right? The pink is live purple chance and the purple is proposed purple chance, right? So as you can see, from 150, I guess even like 0 to 300, right? They're all the same, right? Nothing's changed, which I like because, again, I think the 1 in 24 chance for a purple at a 300 is very fair. I think it's perfect as it is. But as you can see, anything past 300 though, you can see that the purple, which is the proposed purple chance, will be going down. And like I said, I think the 400s to 500s are the major issue because effectively you're getting like double, triple chances, but you're only spending like anywhere from 10 to 15 more minutes, which is like so little time for how many, you know, more purples you're getting, right? So as you can see here, 400 seems to be going down, I want to say 25%. In a 500, it seems to be about a 40% decrease on purple rates. But fear not, like I said, the light bearers and the rings, right, are less common. So this graph will show you like a better example of what I'm talking about, right? So as you can see here, everything is the same from 0 to 300, right? Like, as you can see, but this is where things get interesting, right? So you see the live rates per shadow. That's an easy way to look at things, right? Live rates per shadow. Let's look at it from a 400, right? So currently in a 400, it takes 282 or 83 solos to get a shadow, right? Now the new version is going to be 350. So effectively it went up by 70 extra rates, right? It's not the worst because it's not like double as rare, right? It's only basically like 25%. I want to say, yeah, 25% more rare. But in a 500, for example, it takes 186 rates to get a shadow now, right? And then in the future, it will be 216 rates. So as you can see, this is about a, what, like 30 rate difference. So this is about a 20% increase. So it's not like, you know, all of a sudden it's double as rare. It's 400 is about 25% more rare. This is 500 is about like 20% more rare or something like that. That's an okay nerf considering, remember, the rooms that you're going to be doing are going to be easier as well, right? Baba's going to be easier. Akka's going to be easier. Yeah, rates in TOA is basically going to be easier. So you're going to basically make up for that with faster rates than now, right? So effectively, the nerf is even smaller than that for, you know, some of the more core things like shadows. And same with Missouri, as you can see, it's like the difference is in about, yeah, like 10% or something, you know, 10 to 20% difference. So that's fine. But the light bearers, though, for example, as you can see, the light bearers are going to become 3 times more rare, effectively, or 2.5 times more rare in a 500. Fangs is also going to get 2.5 times more rare in a 500. So that's nice, right? That'll achieve the results of less fangs, less light bearers coming to the game, right? Like, for example, 400s, fangs and light bearers, it currently is 40 rates to see either one of them, right? After the change, it's going to be 70. So it's going to take 70 rates to see like a fang, 70 rates to see a light bearer in a 400. So almost doubled as rare. So that's nice. You know, you're not going to see as many purples, right? But the purple quality will definitely be better. So I think that mentally will probably feel a lot better as well. But yeah, TLDR, it's pretty much what I was hoping for because I think it achieves the best of both worlds, right? Less fangs, less light bearers, also just lowers the drops by a bit, but it doesn't nerf the big drops, you know, like the shadows and the Missouri, nearly as bad, right? Only like a 15%, 20% kind of adjustment, right? More rare. So that's okay. And of course, like I said, the rate's going to be faster, maybe by like 10% or something, right? So it's a much smaller nerf than you guys might think. And oh, it'll achieve a lot of nice economical, positives, right? And maintain the price of these items. So that's awesome. And on top of that, they are also thinking about making the gems, or they're basically confirming that they're going to make the gems more standardized, like in terms of how you get it, right? But currently, it's incredibly RNG. The best way to get gems is basically rushing normal TOAs, but that's so boring because, your purple chance is so bad. So they're going to make it in a way where you're going to be able to get the gems more consistently. And also, they're thinking about allowing you to get like a gem where it's basically like a weaker version of the Fang, but effectively way better than something like Sarmakian Hasta and stuff like that, strictly for TOA. It will only work in TOA. Now, honestly, I don't think that we really need this because, like I said, the rates are literally getting easier. And honestly, getting a Fang in a 300 drop rate wise is perfectly fine as it is, right? And it's not getting nerfed at all in terms of the drop chance, right? So I feel like, man, do you really need something that's similar to Fang when you literally are also just making the rates easier already, right? So yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of this like weird addition, right, to supplement for Iron Man. Honestly, I'm just not a fan of these like specific Iron Man cater updates. Even though I play the heck out of Iron Man, I just don't think this makes sense. But overall though, I love the drop rate idea changes. Great stuff. All right, and there are a few other things that they talked about here. I think some of the cool one is this one for sure. The Sleepy Tablet is going to be more consistent to get early on. So they're basically making it more like 1 in 25 with some dry protection system. I think dry protection system for this kind of stuff is okay, but not for the stuff that they've been doing recently, like Yama. But I don't want to get too deep into that conversation. It's a different topic, whole different can of worms. Also, they're going to be, instead of making the Dragon Hunter wand 3x more common, like they said before, they're going to make it 2x more common because they are buffing this wand. Like, you're going to be able to auto cast Ancients with it as well. And it's going to be a bit stronger against dragons than before, right? To the point that you could actually use it at Ohm, probably over something like a Trident, So yeah, I think 2x more common is probably a better idea. Anyways, guys, thank you guys for watching. And yeah, we will maybe do more of this in the future. Let me know how you guys like this kind of, freestyle kind of videos talking about, blogs and important updates. Yeah, and I'll do more of them in the future if it's things that I know a lot about. All right, peace out.